Esteemed PhD candidate, the College of Deans of this university, represented by us, has read your PhD thesis and the propositions that go with it, and is ready to hear you defend it. Please take your seat.
Thank you.
Does anyone in the audience wish to exchange ideas with the PhD student, candidate? Excuse me. If not, then I will now call upon Professor Signore from Sapienza-University Roma and UMCG Groningen to start the opposition. Professor Signore.
Esteemed candidate, first of all, I want to congratulate for this exciting thesis, if you let me use this word, and also congratulate with your promoter. I guess it was not easy to coordinate from the technical point of view, but also there is quite a number of skills in this thesis, and of course I think that you open a new era and a new important field of investigation for nuclear medicine. Of course, brain anatomy is very difficult, and my question is involved in the nucleus retroambiguus, because in chapter 2 you describe the importance of nucleus retroambiguus in cats, in the physiology of sex in cats. But then in chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6, the nucleus retroambiguus is not mentioned in humans anymore. And it appears again in the final scheme of chapter 8, the final diagram, in which you mention that the nucleus retroambiguus is also important in humans for micturition, for ejaculation, for parturition. And so I wanted to ask you why you did not study the nucleus retroambiguus in humans. It's because it's in the medulla, it's too difficult to image, probably because you have to image by MRI and not by PET. So what are the difficulties of studying the nucleus retroambiguus in men?
As hotly the opponent, thank you very much for your question. You know, the nucleus retroambiguus, what we know about this nucleus is based on a study on cats. The problem is we cannot do some dissection on the humans. It's not ethic. But mostly when we observe the nucleus in cats, we found that it controls the abdominal pressure. And we apply, that means it's the same in human, because the cortex is different between mammals, between humans and cats. But for the brainstem, they're almost the same. The structure of the brainstem is similar between human and cats. Therefore, it's maybe easier to do the study on cats. You say that why we talk about nucleus retroambiguus in the chapter 2, but not in all the chapters, because we want to then study beside what not we, but Professor Homestead had done in cats before, in the medulla oblongata. But now we want to report something in the later chapter about the cortex and the bones and the pituitary. You know, for the sexuality for neurophysiology is quite a puzzle. We just give some parts in the puzzle now for the whole picture of the neurophysiology. And in this case, I think that we need more study for the comprehension of the whole picture.
Whole picture.
I think for the brainstem, the PET is more advantageous because the PET show the deeper part in the brain better than fMRI. And you know, the PET is also less susceptible to the small movement than the fMRI. And during our study, there's some movement, especially the head movement, that we had to correct that motion.
I see.
And during the PET scanning, you know, the volunteers are not bothered by enormous side effects. Maybe go to 120 decibels. It's quite equivalent to the sound in the rock concert or the gunfire or helicopter. Your hearing can be damaged easily without earmuffs or earplugs. And normally the PET situation is less fearful than the fMRI, as volunteer reported. And in this case, we think that the PET is suitable.
Talking about different nuclei involved, also I was intrigued by the role of the visual cortex.
Yeah, yes.
Visual cortex, you mentioned in chapter 4 that in women, or chapter 3, in women there is a deactivation of primary and secondary, and maybe tertiary visual cortex. And this deactivation of the visual cortex, you say that it's important because let it go. The less you see, the better it is. But then in your Stellingen, number 5 and number 6, you mentioned that vision is important. It's important for love. And also you say that love is in the eyes. So can you clarify what is the importance of the vision in the different parts of excitation, arousal, and orgasm?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Vision is important. You know, around 70% of our sensory neurons are found on the retina in the eyes, and almost half of our cerebral cortex are for the process of the visual information. We have 5 senses like vision, ophthalmoception, hearing, audioception, touch, taxioception, or maybe thermoception, nociception, taste and smell. But usually we use the vision always, almost always. But we hear often, touch, sometimes, smell and taste rarely. We, interestingly, during the sleep, they found also some activation in the visual cortex for the memory and to making a dream.
Insects.
Yeah, and the language of love is in the eyes, because if you look at the eye, you can know exactly what they are saying, what they want to say to you, or what they mean to you. That means some people fell in love with someone just the first sight. But however, for the sex, like I say in the Stellingen, the number 1, the high level of tolerance and fear don't go together with the sex behavior. Why? Because during the sex, our feelings go up, and the facts and the reality go down. Also, we found that the activation on the right side of the brain and the activation on the left side of the brain. That means
so probably smell and touch is more important than vision
for
excitation.
Yeah, smell and touch is important for libido, sexual desire, but for orgasm, ejaculation, the whole system shut down. That means it's a little dead in really our brain. We don't hear, we don't see. It's completely dead for our body, our brain.
Thank you very much, Professor Signore. I'll now give the floor to Professor Van Lunsen, University of Amsterdam.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Thank you for the invitation to be in this beautiful room again after 27 years. It's my alma mater. Dear candidates, I first would like to congratulate you with a beautiful, comprehensive piece of work. As a clinical sexologist, I always think that sex is in the mind, in the body, and in the context. And you have proven in your thesis that it's a little bit more than mind indeed. My first question is about chapter 2, where on page 32 you conclude that the major effect of ejaculation and orgasm is not activation, but deactivation. And then you state that high levels of alertness and fear don't go together with high levels of sexual arousal and sexual behavior. I think that's true. You describe the process of letting go, and from a clinical perspective, I totally agree that problems with letting go are at the base of many sexual problems, but not, as you state, problems with desire. How do you explain that problems with letting go have something to do with desire? Is it not arousal, or is a problem with letting go not more connected to problems with orgasm? But I don't see how you connect problems with letting go with sexual desire.
Best Hockelier opponent, thank you very much for your question. As we know, the human sexual response cycle has 5 stages. Like we have libido or desire, sexual arousal, plateau, orgasm or ejaculation in men, and resolution or refractory period. For each stage, there is different hormones and neurotransmitter involved. For sexual desire, there are dopamine, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, but not prolactin involved in the sexual desire. But for orgasm or ejaculation, norepinephrine, serotonin, and here oxytocin, prolactin involved in this process. You see, for each stage, we have different different neurotransmitter hormone involved, and therefore, for each stage, that we have different behavior in our brain, and there we have different treatment. And sexual desire and orgasm, or let's go, is quite, I think, totally different process.
Okay, well, that they are totally different, there we agree. Don't you think that, probably you have heard of the incentive motivation model, and that sexual desire is not at the base of arousal, but sexual desire is the result of beginning sexual arousal.
Yeah.
So there, probably you and I will meet. Sorry, maybe I stated it a little bit too complicated, but I want to go a little bit further to chapter 3.
Yeah.
And there you might have a problem. You conclude that high intensity erotic movies result in deactivation. But don't you think that your results in chapter 3 are influenced by the fact that you downgrade the women volunteers by giving them oral contraceptives. You lower their testosterone levels, and therefore they might be less responsive to sexual stimuli, and so they will only react on high intensive erotic movies.
Yeah.
On several pages in your thesis, you conclude that the highest levels of arousability are during the peri-ovulatory phase because of high testosterone levels. And then you go give them oral contraceptives, so you downgrade them, don't you think?
I think the estrogen increase, so the libido and desire. But in this case, the volunteers during our experiments must using the oral contraceptive because we want the similarity between subjects. Because maybe some can be pregnant, and if we put them in the scan, it changes the result. You see, all subjects are heterosexual, right-handed, and healthy, and they should be not something changed by pregnant or any problem with the pregnancy or miscarriage.
I can understand that you want to standardize the procedure, but my point is that shouldn't you have selected women and tested them during the peri-ovulatory phase instead of giving them oral contraceptives?
The hormones affect a good, but strong effect on sexuality. That is correct. But we want to make the volunteers more comfortable. We cannot say that in this time you had to go in our place, because we recruited the volunteers not only from Groningen, but in different parts in the northern part of Belgium. We just make the plan is fixed to them. It's be better if they feel comfortable than you had to be here in this day, and also the available of the facilities and the department.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I now give the floor to Emeritus Professor Van Rijk, University of Utrecht.
Thank you, Rector. Dear candidate, my congratulations with your thesis. As a nuclear medicine physician, not really involved in brain studies, because we didn't have a cyclotron in Utrecht. This is a very complicated thesis for me, so I had to study very hard. But I understand quite a bit now. To start with your cover, I love strawberries, so now I know the reason why I love to love. So that's the first thing. But if we go to chapter 2, I was quite surprised, at least twice, because at page 27, the last sentence in the neuroimaging of sexual behavior in men and women, you state in about 50% of the cases we had successful ejaculation at the right moment. In female volunteers, the percentage was even higher. So I didn't know that there was an ejaculation by women. And you refrain that in the legend of figure 9 in that there is a rest ejaculation legend. Probably I'm wrong, so that's what I thought, that it's more talking about orgasm than ejaculation of the women. To my surprise, at the end of your thesis, you're talking about the ejaculation of the female with the skin organs, which I wasn't aware of. So probably you were talking about orgasm instead of ejaculation. Isn't that true?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Let's go to the context then. So that's all the problem for me, you know. In chapter 2, it's already mentioned about the let go statement that you continued. It might also explain the reason for hypoactive sexual desire disorders in women, which occurs so frequently, 20 to 30% of all women. That's your statement. So if we continue, and in other words, in 20 to 30% of the women, they have some fear and alertness because they don't let go. In the elderly women, it's well known that hyposexuality occurs. Is now the statement that if you continue in this line, that elderly women have more fear than in the youngsters? So to rephrase more or less the question, if you say there is hyposexuality and then you have fear and alertness, that in the end, if you have more hypersexual desire, that there is more fear in the elderly women.
Mr. Hochgeleerde opponent, thank you very much for your question. You know, the hypoactive sexual desire disorder is characterized by the low sexual desire and the distress or interpersonal difficulty. In this case, they found that the SDD is different for age, premenopause women and postmenopause women, and the percentage of that is different in Europe and in USA. In USA, the peak of the SSD is in the postmenopause women, but in US, well, in Europe, it is for the age 30 and 39.
All right.
We don't know why there's some different about that. Yeah, but normally, you're right, is the sexual desire go down with age, but the distress is also not created with age. Maybe for young women, they are something are afraid to take care of the baby or something, I know. But for the old women, they feel that's normal with the age. If they had a lower sexual desire, it's normal. It's not something really important. But in US, it's quite, not the same like that.
So to conclude, I think you can state it's not at the elderly women that there is more fear, but the process is more complicated. There are more factors involved, probably confounding factors if you search for that.
Yeah.
And it's not the fear and alertness in elderly women. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very nice conclusion to end with.
All right.
We have to move on.
Thank you.
Apologize for that. The next opponent will be Professor De Dijn, UMC here in Groningen.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you, your promoter and supervisors for this very nice work. Also, I did enjoy reading it and learned indeed quite a lot. I have a couple of more general questions and maybe one specific question to you. The first question would be whether the brain knows it is getting an orgasm before the subject experiences the orgasm. I can rephrase it. Like, does your functional neuroimaging indicate an orgasm is coming before the subject consciously experiences it?
Do you mean because best Hockley opponent? Thank you for my question. Sorry. For men, we assume that the orgasm is the same time with ejaculation. But in women, it's quite complicated. Therefore, it's not very comfortable for them because we put the needle in the anus to measure the anal contraction, anal pressure. And they show that the contraction in the real orgasm is really different from the contraction of orgasm imitation or fake orgasm. And we base on the result to know exactly what is the real orgasm or not. Normally, we are not conscious about what happened during orgasm. and also for the volunteer during the experiments.
Okay, I know time is limited, so I'll go to another question. You know, your chapter 3 seems to be very popular. Virtually everybody refers to it, the differentiation of the primary visual cortex. In infatuation or falling in love, which is a special state of mood in mankind, it has been demonstrated that using functional neuroimaging, there is an hyperactivation of the visual cortex for exposure to the faces of the beloved one, while there is a deactivation of potential rivals. Do you have an explanation for that? What may be the meaning? Does it mean something in evolutionary context or whatever?
Actually, we did experiments with the real subjects, real result. It is an empirical result, not a theoretical result. We reported and we published it. But we don't know exactly the mechanism for the shutdown, the activation of the primary.
We don't know the mechanism, but what may be the function of it?
But we have hypothesis for that.
Please?
That means in our brain there's many parts, you know, not all parts are activated in the same time. We cannot hear, see, smell, stay in the same time. It's impossible. And in this case, our brain needs to shut down the primary visual cortex for the high erotic movies, because they say that's not necessary. It's necessary. They know exactly what they're saying.
Okay, thank you, thank you. This was very satisfying to be the answer, at least. If there is time, a very small question. Sure. You know, a lot of physiological and pathophysiological functions of cerebellum have been identified over the last 2 decades. Yeah. While previously it was only considered to be involved with motor activity, we know now there is a cognitive and an emotional cerebellum, among others. What would be the function of the sexual cerebellum?
Sexual. We found in man activation in the cerebellum, but we don't know exactly what happened, but we know during normal sexual intercourse we need a loss of motion. It's quite, and therefore the cerebellum may take care of the motion during that intercourse, that sexual relation, for the balance or the feel that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. The next opponent will be Professor Den Boer, UMCG Groningen.
Yeah, thank you. Dear candidates, I want to congratulate you with this thesis. It's a very original topic, and I also want to congratulate your promoter and co-promoters. But I also have a question. In chapter 4, you state that there is an increased activity of the pituitary. And then at multiple times you mention, well, that's no wonder, because if you show, if you look at the oxytocin levels during orgasm, they're increased both in males and females. Now the literature is a little bit inconsistent about this, but let's assume this is true. The point is that it's very difficult to say that yes, there is an increase in the pituitary, and thus there will also be an increase in oxytocin. The reason is that not all hormones which are secreted by the pituitary are increased. So if you use oxytocin as a biomarker for increased activity of the pituitary, then other hormones should also be increased. Now, one hormone which is also secreted by the pituitary is certainly not increased, and that's ACTH. And cortisol is also not increased during sexual activity. So my question is, what exactly are you measuring when you say there is an increased activity of the pituitary?
That's hopefully important. Thank you very much for your question. We use the PET imaging. That means we measure the RCPF, the regional cerebral flow. Yeah. And we see that increase the blood flow during the real orgasm in women, but not in men. Mm-hmm. You're right that there's many hormones did not increase during orgasm or ejaculation, but oxytocin, they found that increase of oxytocin in the plasma.
Yes.
during ejaculation and orgasm, also prolactin. But these hormones are secreted by the pituitary.
Yes.
And we found the activation of the pituitary. We did measure the oxytocin levels during orgasm, but Carmichael did that. And we make the connection between two of them because, you know, during orgasm, there are lots of contraction of the pelvic organs and the pelvic muscles. That means the smooth muscle and striated muscles. And oxytocin is for the contraction of the uterus.
Sure.
Yeah. Therefore, we make the connection between this one, and oxytocin is also the hormones for fertilization. You know, it's for the final contraction, it's for the ejection of the semen out of the urethra, and in men and inside the uterus in women to make something eggs and the sperm seed together or something. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Well, not entirely, but it's okay. But I have a second question. And the second question is about your future perspective at the end of your thesis. And there you state, you draw this model, which is very nice. And then you also state that you see an important role for the PAG, the periaqueductal gray.
Yeah.
Now, in your first Stellingen, you state that high levels of alertness and fear don't go together with sexual behavior, right?
Yes.
Now, the point is, the PAG has been studied during actual neurosurgical procedures in men who were fully conscious. And what they did, and that's decades ago, they put an electrode in the PAG, and what you get is panic anxiety. So my question to you is, what do you think the exact role of the PAG will be during sexual behavior in the model that you draw in your last chapter?
But no, the role of PAG, the periaqueductal gray, is for modulation of pain and defensive behavior. And they use the deep brain stimulation for the chronic pain patient. They stimulate in the PAG, and the patient didn't feel any pain.
True.
But so fear, I think that imminent, that the death is coming. And they don't want to do that again because it's so fearful. They don't feel pain, but so fearful. Because PAG modulate the level of alertness. In this case, for sexual activities, normally we need to lower down the level of alertness in our brain, in our body. And I think the PAG take the responsibility for that one. Also, the PAG has strong connection to POFC and PFSC, the pointing organ stimulating center, and pointing floor, the pelvic floor stimulating center. And this, I think that's also the mostly for PAGs in this one for emotional motor control of the pelvic floor and the pelvic organs during orgasm and ejaculation.
Okay.
Is this the answer to your
That's
question?
a good answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I'm calling upon Dr. Klein, UMCG, Groningen.
Dear candidate, congratulations with your courageous thesis, which is also scientifically very important. I also have a question about pituitary.
Yes.
Also about chapter 4. And I would like to exchange thoughts with you about the increase of cerebral blood flow of the pituitary and what it might mean. And my question actually is, you say the increase of the blood flow of the pituitary is caused by activation, but could it also be vasodilatation? Because if it's only activation, I would expect that also the hypothalamic nuclei would also activate. So is it actually a vascular response, or is it a neurological activation of the tissue from the hypothalamus to the pituitary? That's actually my question. What do you think?
Yeah, that's hopefully important. Thank you very much for your question. We also expect the activation in the hypothalamus. You know, the pituitary is tightly controlled by the hypothalamus.
Yeah.
Especially the paraventricular cells in the hypothalamus and neural cells. But we didn't find that. Also, we lowered the threshold of analysis, but we found only the absence of activation in the hypothalamus.
And how do you explain?
But when we use the raw analysis, we found the activation in the hypothalamus in men, but not in women. During ejaculation, but not orgasm, female orgasm. Also, Hammond, they also found the activation in the hypothalamus in men, but not in women, not with orgasm, but with sexual stimuli. And Komisaruk, he found the activation of the hypothalamus in women, no, in women, in only one woman during orgasm. But this woman had a transsectional spinal cord injury, only in one case.
So you think it's actually quite variable. There is activation in the hypothalamus, but it's too variable to pick up in a group of people. Okay. Thanks for your answer.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Then we go to the next opponent, Dr. Kolen, UMCG Groningen.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. First of all, I would like to congratulate you with your thesis. And I would like to come back to chapter 4 and 5. If you look at the tasks that you asked the volunteers to perform, it's quite challenging. And I was wondering how you could find these volunteers who would be willing to participate in the study. How could you do the recruitment of the volunteers?
That's hopefully important. Thank you for my spell question. We make an advertisement on the newspaper, and the volunteers come from different parts in the Netherlands and in the northern part of Belgium. You know, not everyone wants to do something for science. Not all of us want to be a volunteer during a scientific experiments, especially some experiment with a very difficult task. Some would say dirty task. But there are always many people really want to do something for science. That way we are lucky here. Why we can do a lot of experiments. I know for the study we get more volunteers than we expected for the study. Maybe not all, you know, they are not the whole population, but there are some zero view of the whole population because they're healthy, heterosexual, right-handed, but not prostitution, with a very healthy relationship. And maybe it's open in the northern part of Belgium to do that. I don't expect that we can do something like that in Asia. Maybe we can do that in the Netherlands.
But coming back to your answer, do you think that the volunteers who have participated in the study, do you think that they are representative for the normal population? Or do you think that they are a bit...
For representative or not? You know, for every study, the highest number of volunteers is the best. But in this case, we have the optimal number of volunteers because there are many criteria, inclusion and exclusion criteria for the selection of volunteers. And it's not easy task. You know that not everyone wants to be in the study. But we select, we have the number of volunteers. This number is not based on power of calculation, but it's based on the setup of the design of the study. And in accordance to other pet study in the same field. Maybe they are not the whole population, I have to say that again, but they have some part of the population, but the result is quite a general view for the whole population, what happened. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kohle. And I now call upon Professor Elzinga, also Secretary of the College of Deans.
Thank you very much. Also, congratulations from my side to the nice work. Also, I would like to congratulate your promoter and co-promoters. I would like to hear a little bit your opinion about what you mentioned in your future perspectives, that you want to investigate, or that you say the role of neurotransmitters in this whole process is unknown. And so far you did all your studies with O15 labeled water, that you measure the blood flow as activation of the various brain regions, and therefore you were able to, let's say, to do very brief measurements because the half-life of oxygen-15 is quite short, so you could repeatedly do these experiments to increase statistics. But so this is then, then you measure the blood flow. How would you like to perform an experiment to measure neurotransmitter release? For instance, if you would look at folks at dopamine release, how would such an experiment look like? Is it possible anyhow?
Yeah. That's hopefully important. Thank you very much for your question. As you know, dopamine is a neurotransmitter occurring in many animals, including vertebrates and invertebrates. Dopamine is released by many areas in the brain, especially the substantial nigra apparatus, compactus, and VTA, the ventral tegmental area. Dopamine is also released by the hypothalamus to inhibit the release of prolactin from the anterior lobe of the pituitary.
But how would you like to measure that? Because do you want to use a specific tracer for that to measure dopamine release? And because the timing may be a problem, because with water you can do very rapid measurements. With, for instance, another tracer, this would be completely different. So how do you see that? Do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, it's also a problem because it's not really a big advantage for PET for the time series scanning. But on the other hand, they found that dopamine receptor in the striate, especially in the nucleic occupants, decreased in the abuser of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and alcohol using the raclopride radiotracer ligand. Raclopride is a compound acting as antagonist on dopamine D2 receptor in the nucleic occupants. You know, hyposexuality is not good, but hypersexuality is not good either. I mean, I talk about pornography addiction people. Many people spend maybe more than half salary for prostitution, or most of the time searching the pornography on the internet. And we want to make the whole picture like that for addiction of pornography, cocaine, heroin.
If you want, you can finish your answer in a short way, please.
Or maybe just answer with a yes or no. Do you think you can use carbon raclopride to measure dopamine release in orgasm studies?
For orgasm,
yes or no?
I think, yeah. Maybe. Yes, in between. Yeah.
Can we come to a yes or no? The order Finet has already been. Now, then the College of Deans will withdraw for some time to consider its decision. plaats.
Er is nog geen gynaecoloog.
Esteemed PhD candidate, the College of Deans of this university, represented by us, after reading your PhD thesis and the accompanying propositions, and after hearing you defend it, has decided to award you the PhD degree at this University of Groningen, as you desired. Your primary supervisor, Professor Dirks, is authorized to award you with this honor in the customary fashion, and thereafter the laudatio will be by Dr. Willemsen.
Volgaarne aanvaard ik de taak mij door de rector magnificus opgedragen. Doch alvorens deze opdracht uit te voeren, zal de eerste co-promotor, Dr. Willemsen, enige persoonlijke woorden tot u richten.
Win. So here you are. You have almost reached the end of your PhD. And in a few minutes you will receive the diploma for 4 years of hard work, which resulted in this thesis and the defense today. A PhD study is always a period of personal development. Not only development in what we could call the scientific process, but also on a personal level, through the interaction with supervisors, colleagues, and in your case, a different society. And although maybe knowledge and science nowadays may be considered universal, it cannot be denied that there are still cultural differences between different societies, and differences which need to be learned and from which we can learn. As an example, I have never and will probably never again meet a student which is so polite and who is always willing to perform all the work which is necessary. But of course this also gives us a problem, because Dutch society is also very much about expressing yourself, about taking initiative and having your own opinion. So what do you do when you think that your supervisor may not be totally correct, or even worse, wrong? I think this is a really big problem, but you have learned to find your own way in that, not by saying that I'm wrong, but just pointing out the data and maybe doing it again and again until I find out myself that maybe there are other aspects to the data. I think that this is a good part on your development. Also in the first period here in Groningen, I think Caroline Beers was very helpful for you, also with just normal aspects in daily life. And I remember in the beginning you were always wearing sandals, even with winter approaching. And if I'm informed correctly, she even bought you a pair of shoes because she was feeling sorry for you, or at least for your feet. Win, a PhD defense is often about little details. And for the audience it may be difficult to understand what your thesis is actually about. So, let's talk about sex. It may be hard to believe that in 1991, when this song from the Salt and Pepper became a hit, it was the first time that a song with the word sex in it reached a high position in the charts. And now, 25 years ago, we are able to do this type of research. And I think this is important, because as you write in your first chapters, there is actually much more that we don't know than what we know, especially in humans. And maybe we know a little bit about which brain areas are involved, but actually the relationship between these areas and how they all contribute, so the brain network, that is even a bigger problem. I think that understanding this role is something that Professor Holstege is very interested in. And in 2009, you could start your PhD under his supervision. And in collaboration with the Department of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging, we started a PET study to investigate brain activation in women while they were watching movies. And this is chapter 3. And many people found this an extremely interesting chapter, as we have seen. I will probably never forget the meeting in which we were all together watching these high erotic videos and all pretending that it is quite important, and actually it was quite important, but also I've never felt more like being a participant in a sketch of Monty Python. For this first study, I think that the collaboration with Professor Weimer Schulz and Dr. Ellen Laan from Amsterdam was invaluable. We would not have been able to do this study without support. Now, I will not repeat the results. I mean, everybody can read your thesis, but I think that we have really seen some new results which were not known before. We also examined the brain networks involved in sexual stimulation and orgasm, both in men and women, and therefore you looked at an old study from Yannico Georgiades, and now you performed an additional motion correction, and that really helped to clarify the image. We got much better and much clearer results, which we did not obtain before. Now, as you mentioned and was also discussed, this is only one way of studying the brain, and maybe in the future we will have the opportunity to really go into the neuroreceptor studies. I think that would be really interesting. When a PhD is never the work of an individual, but always of a team. I already mentioned some of the people that collaborated, but I think we can be, it needs to be said that it would not have been possible without collaboration with your promoter, Professor Dirks and Professor Holstein. Also for me, it was a pleasure to work with Dr. Dordijn on this project as a co-supervisor. And of course, we must thank the reading committee, Professor Paans, Professor Siguroi, and Professor Weimer Schulz. However, this PhD would never have succeeded without the essential support of your family and your friends. Therefore, I not only want to congratulate you, but also your wife, your family, and all your friends.
Please all rise. Uit kracht dan van de bevoegdheid ons bij de wet toegekend, volgens het besluit van het College voor Promoties van deze universiteit, verklaar ik, Rudy André Dirks, u, Hieu Kim Huynh, te bevorderen tot dokter en u alle rechten te verlenen die door wet of gewoonte aan het doctoraat aan de Rijksuniversiteit Groningen zijn verbonden. And I have to ask you a promise. Do you promise as a doctor in the future to act according to the Dutch Code of Conduct for Scientific Research?
I do promise.
Please sit down. Nadat ik al zo de mij opgelegde taak heb volbracht, mag ik de eerste zijn die u met deze promotie geluk wens en u als dokter begroet.
As proof of this PhD degree, I will present you with a certificate signed by Director Magnificus, the Secretary, and your supervisors, sealed with the Great Seal of the University of Groningen. But before doing so, very learned sir, it's my pleasant duty to congratulate you also on behalf of the College of Deans of this university on your degree you earned. Thank you. album Amicorum. This is to remind you of your time here at the University of Groningen, at the city of Groningen, and it's signed by all the participants in the project. And I now declare this ceremony for closed.